Yeah, thank you. I'm Tom Derry, and I'm the founder of the Hamtramck Stadium Grounds Crew, and we're just a group of volunteers who are interested in preserving baseball history as well as helping out our community. And we actually got our start back in 2010. Before we came to Hamtramck Stadium, we cleaned up the site of Tiger Stadium, a longtime home of the Tigers. They played at Navin Field from 1912 to 1999. Before that, it was Bennett Park. But so we started out there, and when we took over the field there, I'll just talk about the Tiger Stadium site for just a minute before I get on to Hamtramck, because it kind of ties in. We had a similar situation. The lot was completely overgrown, and here's a picture of what it looked like behind home plate. So you can see all the weeds, how tall they were, over 6 feet tall. And so we decided to do something about it. The city didn't want to clean up the site, so we said we're going to do it. So we got a crew together and went out there, and the city kept kicking us off the field, but we kept coming back. And I actually had to rent a brush hog for about 10 weeks in a row to knock down all these giant 6-foot weeds that were all over the entire 9-acre lot. And eventually we fixed up the field really nice. You can see it kind of turned into a beautiful ball field here. And it became a tourist attraction. It drew people from around the country and the world who wanted to visit a real Field of Dreams, not a Hollywood one like in Dyersville, but a real one where Shoeless Joe Jackson really did play. So, and we had numerous games, including vintage baseball games. There's a little shot of a vintage baseball game that we had back there at that site. We had many of them. And we had a lot of former Tigers come out to the field. They were excited about what we did. Here's Tiger catcher John Walkenfuss. He drove up from Delaware. He came to the field several times, became a good friend of our grounds crew. He was just one. Here's 1984 world champions Dave Rosema and Sweet Lou Whitaker. They came out. 1968 Tiger MVP, World Series MVP, Mickey Lolich came out, as well as Denny McClain, who won 31 games that year. And of course, Willie Horton came out to the field as well. He came out there. And we fixed up the field really nice. We did a great job. You can see how good our dirt infield looked there. It was just, we had a groundskeeper from Comerica Park tell us that it looked professional. So we did a really good job. Eventually, the site was handed over to a group called Detroit PAL. And so then we didn't have a home. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I actually got married to my wife, Sarah, at the Tiger Stadium field, and it wore Detroit Stars jersey, like the Negro League Detroit Stars of the 1920s and 30s. So I didn't know at that time we'd end up at Hamtramck Stadium. So now so one of the people who followed us at Navin Field was Tom Nichai, and he was the superintendent of Hamtramck Public Schools. And he really liked the work we were doing, and he knew about the plans to renovate historic Hamtramck Stadium. Now, there's only about 12 Negro League ballparks still in existence, and only 2 have had more games played than Hamtramck Stadium. That'd be Hinchliffe Stadium in Paterson, New Jersey, and Rickwood Field in Birmingham, Alabama. And you may have seen on the news recently, they're talking about how they're going to raise funds to renovate Hinchliffe Stadium. And I thought I saw something that they're going to use artificial turf. I hope that's not true. That I'd be kind of disappointed. You know, it doesn't seem right to put artificial turf at a historic baseball site like that. But we're using real grass here in Hamtramck. And so, but before the Detroit Stars moved to Hamtramck Stadium, they played on the east side of Detroit at Mack Park, at the southeast corner of Mack and Fairview Street. So here's a picture of the Detroit Stars back when they were at Mack Park on the east side of Detroit. Now, the team at that time was the owner was named Tenny Blunt, and he was the owner, and he would own the team until 1925 when it was bought by John Rosing. Now, John Rosing owned the stadium, and there was John Rosing was he owned some clothing stores in the Detroit area, including one that was right next to Navin Field. And you can see here's John Rosing with Ty Cobb. There's a picture of them together at Navin Field. So John Rosing bought the team in 1925. And then in 1929 at Mack Park, they had a fire. And it was interestingly enough, it was started by the grounds crew. Um, the infield, the dirt was wet, and they decided to dry it out by pouring gasoline on there and lighting it, which was actually pretty common in those days. Occasionally, I still read a story about that happening. Not too often, but sometimes it still happens. But this is the result of what happened. The fire spread to the grandstand, and Mack Park burned down. Not completely, but the grandstand burned down. That was July of 1929. So they did not rebuild the grandstand, but they finished out the season of 1929 at Mack Park. So then the owner, John Rosink, he decided that he wanted a new stadium. So he looked at Hamtramck, and he decided to lease some land from the Detroit Lumber Company right next to the Grand Trunk Railroad. And he did something owners don't do today. He paid for his own stadium. He paid $100,000 to build Hamtramck Stadium. So it opened up in May of 1930, and John Rosink, the owner, he had Ty Cobb come up. He took a train from Georgia to throw out the first pitch. Here's a picture on top. On top, there's a picture of Ty Cobb throwing out the first pitch in May of 1930. Then underneath is a photo from 89 years later, his granddaughter, who threw out the first pitch less than 2 years ago at Hamtramck Stadium before we had a vintage baseball game. So it's kind of cool to see Ty Cobb there, 1930, and then 89 years later, his granddaughter is in the same spot, throwing out the first pitch before a vintage baseball game. So, so we hope to have a home there in Hamtramck for many years to come. This is what it looked like just like 2 years ago. This is Hamtramck Stadium. You can see it's overgrown. The dirt infield isn't there. There's a fence up there behind home plate and in front of the grandstand. And this picture is taken in the off season. You can't really see all the trees. It kind of had a little forest growing in there. It was just really overgrown from decades of neglect. And so our grounds crew, after we joined up with Hamtramck, we spent several days, and we had a crew with our chainsaws. We cleared out that entire area behind home plate. And we actually had a few vintage ball games over the last couple of years there. Now the Detroit Stars, of course, most of you know that their best player was Norman Turkey Stearns. Now Turkey Stearns, here's the image of Turkey Stearns here. So he was an all-around outstanding player. Baseball historian Bill James ranked him as the 25th greatest player of all time. So the best player I ever saw play for the Tigers was Al Kaline. And Bill James ranked Kaline the 90th greatest. But Turkey Stearns, he thought, was the 25th. He just did everything well. He was a power hitter, and he hit over 340 lifetime. And he is recognized as being, some records show him as being the Negro League all-time home run champion, and not Josh Gibson. But so he was their star, and he was a very interesting man, and he really loved his bats. He would talk to his bats. He thought his bats were living extensions of his own arms, and he would carry his favorite bats around in an oversized case, like a violin case. And he was known to sleep with his bats and talk to them. After games, players would talk about hearing him talk in the hotel room, talking about his bat and telling the bat it didn't do a good job. I got to pop up with you. I'm not using you next time. I should have used this bat. So his bats were very important to him. So Stearns, while he would spend his summers playing baseball with the Detroit Stars, in the wintertime, he would work in an auto factory owned by Walter Briggs. Now, Walter Briggs was an owner of the Detroit Tigers. He wasn't allowed to play on his baseball team in the summer, but he could work in his factory in the off season. But he didn't remain bitter even in his later years. He would often, in the throughout the late 1970s, before he died. Here's a picture of Stearns, younger, an image of a painting of him, and then him holding a bat in 1979, taken just a couple months before he passed away. So Stearns, after he retired, he spent over 20 years then working for the Ford Motor Company, the Rouge plants, where he worked alongside a young Berry Gordy, who would later found Motown Records. But he didn't remain bitter. He would go to games at Tiger Stadium. He would sit in the lower deck, right field bleachers, and he would watch Ron LaFleur out there patrolling center field while he saw LaFleur wearing his number 8, the same number Stearns wore. And but he wasn't bitter. I mean, he saw LaFleur out there playing for the Detroit Tigers, something he never was able to do. But so Stearns was by far the best player that the Detroit Stars ever had. And so the park is now being renamed Turkey Stearns Field rather, at Hamtramck Stadium. So we had an opening to dedicate the name of the park just this last fall. So, but there were many other great players. Now, the Detroit Stars played at Hamtramck Stadium in 1930 and 1931. In 1930, they made it to the Negro League World Series. They lost in 7 games to the St. Louis Stars. Then in 1931, it was tough times during the Depression. The team folded. And then in 1932, there was a new Negro League team in the East-West League, and that was the Detroit Wolves. And their star player, they didn't have one star player. They actually had 5 Hall of Famers. So it was like one of the most talented teams ever assembled. So that team the Detroit Stars had the Hall of Famers Cool Papa Bell in center field. Mule Suttles played first base. Willie Wells is a shortstop. Ray Brown played left field, and Smokey Joe Williams was a pitcher on that team. So here's a picture of Cool Papa Bell. So he was on that team in 1932. Of course, a lot of stories about his speed. Satchel Paige said that he was so fast that when he was in his hotel room, he could turn off the light switch, jump in the bed, and get under the covers before the room got dark. And there may be some truth to that story because of a faulty wiring system, but he was incredibly fast. Another story says he could hit a line drive over past the pitcher and slide into second and get hit with his own ball. But here's another picture of Cool Papa Bell. So he played center field there at Hamtramck Stadium in 1932. Now, when I'm out there on my riding mower now, cutting the grass, I often think about the great players there. I think about Turkey Stearns when I'm out there, and I wonder what they would think about what we're doing today. And one day I was out there thinking about Turkey Stearns, and I looked over near first base and I saw a large bird walking around. And so I got a little closer on my mower to see what it was. And sure enough, it was a turkey. So I thought that was a sign that I think he would approve of what we're doing. So that was the only time I ever actually saw a turkey out there. But so that 1932 team, when the Detroit Wolves were there, also features Smokey Joe Williams. So there was just so much incredible talent, and so many of the greatest players played on that field at Hamtramck Stadium. And of course, Satchel Paige right here. This is a picture of him actually at Briggs Stadium in 1941. He pitched many times at Hamtramck Stadium. And here's another one of Satchel Paige with that high leg kick, also taken at Briggs Stadium. And so you have a couple here of, here's Josh Gibson catching. It's kind of neat. Every time I'm at that field, I'm at home plate, I just think, wow, this is where Josh Gibson caught right here. So it's really incredible. It never gets old just to be out there. So actually, I took a picture of myself holding this sign last year saying, Josh Gibson played here. So just so much incredible history there at Hamtramck Stadium. And there's another one of a famous picture of Josh Gibson batting. So, but the talent there at Hamtramck Stadium in that field goes beyond just the great Negro League players. Obviously, they were the best that ever played there. There's no doubt about that. But there were other outstanding players who came from Hamtramck. It's only a 2.5 square mile city, and yet 10 men made it to the major leagues who either were born in Hamtramck or went to high school in Hamtramck. And so the one that played the longest in the major leagues, I'm sorry, the one who played for 17 years was Steve Gromek. And here he is pitching with the Cleveland Indians. Steve Gromek was a very good pitcher. He was, of course, he wasn't the ace of that incredible, staff they had there in Cleveland, but he had his moments. And he actually, over his career, he won 123 games. He had 92 complete games, 17 shutouts. In 1948, he was a surprise starter to start Game 4 of the World Series, and he went the distance, and he got the victory. And the game-winning hit was delivered by Larry Doby, who was the first black player in the American League. And Larry Doby hit a home run in the 7th inning. It's Cleveland won the game 2-1. And after the game, Steve Gromek, Hamtramck's own Steve Gromek, went up to Larry Doby and gave him a big hug. And the Cleveland Plain dealer took this picture, and it went out over the wires. And it became a famous photo. It was a symbol of integration in baseball. And it actually meant a lot to Larry Doby. Throughout his life, he would carry that picture around with him when he was facing discrimination, whether he's not being allowed in hotels or he was taking abuse from fans. And even during his Hall of Fame induction speech, he mentioned it and how much that meant to him. So Steve Gromek was another one of the outstanding players who grew up there in Hamtramck. And there were others. In fact, there were 3 brothers, the Paciorek brothers from Hamtramck, who all played on that field, all made it to the major leagues. The first one was John Paciorek. Now, he had a very short career, but very interesting. He only played in 1 game near the end of the season in 1963. But he had a perfect game. He came up to bat 5 times, and he got 3 hits and had 2 walks, knocked in 3 runs. And there've been some players who've retired with a 1,000 batting average, but he's the only one to do it with more than 2 at bats. So, but unfortunately, John Paciorek, he had some injuries, and he never made it back into the major leagues. He played it for a while in the minors. He had 2 brothers who also made it to the major leagues. The youngest one is Jim Paciorek, and he played 1 year with the Milwaukee Brewers back in 1987. The most successful of the Paciorek brothers was Tom. Tom Paciorek played 18 years, so he actually played the longest of anybody from Hamtramck. So here's a picture of him with the Dodgers. He played with several teams, first baseman, outfielder, and he was very good. He had a .282 lifetime batting average, and just a very successful long career. So the Pacioreks were some of the best players to ever come out of Hamtramck. Another one was Ike Blessett. He went to Hamtramck High School, and here's a picture of him over here at Tiger Stadium. He graduated from Hamtramck High School in 1967. He spent a little bit of time in the minors, then he made it up to the Tigers. He played briefly in 1972. So there's a picture of him. We can see the center field scoreboard behind him there in the bleachers. And next to him, he's in the bleachers at Hamtramck Stadium. This is just taken about 2 years ago. He's in the grandstand there, which it's going to be renovated later this year. But Ike Blessett, while he didn't have a long career, he's never forgotten Hamtramck and his baseball field. And to this day, he's a big supporter of our grounds crew. He comes out to the field all the time, and you can see him here. He's on our riding mower. There's Ike Blessett in the middle there with our grounds crew at Hamtramck Stadium. So so Ike is one of the best players to ever play on that field. But it's more than just the Negro League players, or even the players from Hamtramck who made it to the majors. There's some that never did. One in particular is Art Pinky Darris. And he's recognized as the greatest little leaguer who ever played the game. In 1959, he led Hamtramck Little League team to the Little League World Series championship in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. And he was just incredibly dominating. So here's a picture of Pinky Darris, and that's a 12-year-old you're looking at there. He was just unbelievable. Some of his stats from that year: he had 18 starts, 18 complete game victories, 16 shutouts, 10 no-hitters, 298 strikeouts. Only 26 players were able to hit the ball out to the field. That's how dominating he was. And he also at the plate, he had 13 home runs in 13 tournament games. And then 2 years later, when he was in the Pony League, at age 14, he once again led Hamtramck to the national championship. So here's Pinky Darris with his teammates. You can see him over here, towering over everybody else. But Yeah, to this day, Pinky Darris is recognized as being the greatest Little League player of all time, and he's still alive, and he's going to be 75 years old this August. And one of our grounds crew members, Dave Mesray, had a great idea about how we might have a little celebration for him at the field for his 75th birthday and invite him out there. That diamond where he played at is actually, it's not the same diamond that Turkey Stearns and Detroit Stars used. And then it's in deep center field, the Little League diamond where he played. And we're also going to renovate that. So hopefully that field will be renovated before this year's over. So there's so much incredible history there in Hamtramck, and so many great players there. So our grounds crew is excited to be a part of the renovation of Hamtramck Stadium and to do something positive for the community. It's a very diverse community, maybe the most in the United States. I believe there's close to like 30 different languages that are spoken in that city that's only 2.5 square miles. And so we're glad to be able that we're able to move on. Now, like I was saying before, when we started out, it was kind of rough in there. This is a picture I took behind home plate. This is the area in front of the grandstand. This is after we cut down several trees just to be able to get in there and take a photo. So it was really overgrown in bad shape. We had to go in there with, we brought some chainsaws in there. And it was a lot of work to clear it off, but we have a really dedicated crew, our Hamtramck Stadium grounds crew. Here's just one picture of one of the piles up against the building. You can see how high it goes. We actually had 3 of those piles. That's how much, debris that we had to cut down behind home plates. So we do a lot more than just cut the grass. It's a lot more involved in that, and our crew is just amazing. So now Hamtramck Stadium they had a fundraiser in March of 2019, a patronicity campaign to raise funds to fix up the infield. And if $50,000 was raised, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation was going to match with another $50,000, and that goal was reached, the $50,000. And thanks a lot to the musician Jack White. Jack White is a Detroiter, and he made a very generous donation to help with the field. And so the renovation of the field happened this last summer in fall. And I have pictures. You can see, here's our crew. Well, first I'll show you a picture of Jack White. He's out there with the Negro League player, Ron Teasley. So Jack White, after donating money to the cause, he then scheduled a sandlot game, a fundraiser, to help raise even more money for Hamtramck Stadium. So he came out, and we had a great time, and the Friends of Historic Hamtramck Stadium were able to raise even more money to help renovate the field. So we're excited about that. And so new turf went in. I'm sorry, natural grass went in, and we're really old school. We're just using a water reel to water the grass. We don't have underground sprinkler system. I know that's something that they're hoping for down the road, but right now we're just hooking up. We connect 5 100-foot fire hoses from a fire hydrant on the street outside the stadium, and we hook it up to this water reel, and then we're able to pull it out another 280 feet. So the new sod went in. The sod was donated, the infield sod, by the Hillcrest Sod Farm in Romulus, Michigan. They're very generous. And so we then were watering this last year. It was put in August, which doesn't seem like a really good time to install sod, but we were dedicated. We were out there every day. We got there at 7 a.m. and we were watering all day. So the grass did survive and thrive. It really looked good. And here's another picture. You can see our crew member, Roy Jeffrey, out there watering the grass manually, just with just the hose. So sometimes we don't have to use the water reel for areas that are easier to reach. We just use the hose there. So, but so the the grandstand, here's a picture of the grandstand as the first part of the infield sod just went in. So the area around the pitcher's mound just went in, and you get to see the grandstand there. So April of last year, the National Park Service announced that an African American civil rights grant in the amount of $400 grandstand. So money has been raised for the grandstand, and that's going to happen. The grandstand is going to be renovated, so we're excited about that. So, but they're going to replace the frame is in outstanding shape. The metal frame of the stadium is in great shape, and the boards will be replaced. They'll be wood again to give it that old time look. Should be coming in the next few months. So you can see this is how it ended up looking after we were watering it every day. The field looks outstanding, and it was pretty rough of the field. You can see we put down the batter's box and baselines. So, and here's an aerial shot of how it looks after we got the new sod down there. So I was just down there yesterday cutting the grass, and it's looking really good. Excited about having vintage baseball and of course other games at the field, and we're going to have our own vintage baseball club, the Hamtramck Hussars. And the Hussars were the 16th, 18th century horseback soldiers of Poland. So Hamtramck is known for being a Polish community. For many years it was. Bakeries and meat markets and things. So, but while it doesn't have as many Polish residents as it used to, people still come to Hamtramck to celebrate all things Polish. And so the vintage baseball team, the Hamtramck Hussars, I have a picture of a couple of their members here. Here's, of course, they all got their nicknames. So there's Hatchet there, showing off the new sharp uniform. It was designed by Louise Stitches, is her vintage baseball nickname. So she designed it. And here's a picture of Hatchet's wife, Scrappy, Yvette. So there she is in her uniform. So we're excited about having some vintage baseball games. Hopefully they'll happen real soon. So, but we've already had some before we had the new sod put in. Here's a picture that we had, a picture I took of a couple of years ago, a vintage baseball game that we had at the field before the new sod went in. And here's another one. That's Matthew Barrel Roller Barnard, and he put together a really big, nice tournament. He puts together very large tournaments, vintage baseball tournaments. And here, and I got one more picture I'm going to show before I'm finished. And this is one taken right after one of the vintage games we had 2 years ago. And there's Ty Cobb's granddaughter in the center. That's Cindy Cobb with the vintage ball players who played that day. So it's been a real thrill to help preserve baseball history. The new field, the dimensions will be a little bit different. The original, the left field, was 315 feet. The new one is probably going to be 335. The right field was really long back in 1930. It was 407. The new one's probably going to be 325. The center field will be 326. The old one, believe it or not, was 515 feet originally. So, but that, once again, that center field area is where that historic Little League diamond is. So we have to preserve the Little League diamond. So we want to be able to have games for the kids to play in the Little League diamond, and also on the historic Detroit Stars, Detroit Wolves field. So, but I want to thank you for letting me tell you a little bit about our grounds crew and what we're doing there in Hamtramck. And we're excited. If you want to follow our grounds crew, you can follow us at the Hamtramck Stadium Grounds Crew on Facebook. And you can also check out Historic Hamtramck. So check out Historic Hamtramck Stadium. And that's a page put together by the Friends. And we're working with the Friends of Historic Hamtramck Stadium. They've been raising money. We're going to start raising our own. We're officially becoming a nonprofit ourselves now. And so it's been a thrill to work with the Friends of Historic Hamtramck Stadium, as well as the city. They've been great, and they're happy to have us on board, and we're looking forward to having a long relationship. And I can't wait to hear the umpire cry play ball.
Are there any plans? You talk about all the history of Hamtramck Stadium. Do they have any plans to set up like historic plaques or something that tell the story for the people that come to visit Hamtramck Stadium?
Well, right now there is a historic marker
Okay.
that is out there. It's just outside the ballpark. It's actually on Joseph Campo. If you come by, you want to read both sides of it. It tells the history of Hamtramck Stadium. So it's a Michigan historical marker. And that's what's there now. But there will be more things as
Good.
the field. And there's plans to even have a statue of Turkey Stearns. And there may be other artwork there as well to recognize the rich history of the grounds.